days. With regard to part two and how all this ties together, what are the issues and volatility shown in the spreadsheets telling us? We know that there's $23 trillion worth of property scam, and there's a video link, and we'll put this document below this video. The current system of school district bond issuance in Texas bears a striking resemblance to the MEO bills and economic fraud of the 1930s in Germany. Both systems rely on artificial value creation to sustain government spending that the real economy cannot afford. Here's how they match. Artificial value to back the debt. The MEO bills, the German regime created MEO bills, promissory notes, with no real gold or currency backing to fund massive military rearmament. They essentially invented money out of thin air to pay for projects they couldn't afford. The Texas school boards use appraisal fraud, which creates fraudulent school district bonds, which accomplishes the exact same thing of creating false value, no different than the German regime. By artificially inflating property values, sometimes by 30% or more in a single year, despite low inflation, the school districts create a higher tax base on paper. This higher paper value allows them to issue massive new bonds that the actual incomes of the residents cannot support. Just like the paper chasing paper in the silver market, the majority of paper has no value, as its ability to make good based on the physical does not exist, meaning the extreme over leverage is not backed by assets. What do we have? We have a ticking clock of debt. The MEO bills, by 1939, those bills were coming due. Germany had no real money to pay them, making the conquest and the seizure of foreign resources the only way to avoid domestic collapse. The Texas school bonds, those bonds are issuing new bonds just to pay off the interest on the old bonds. Starting to see a theme here? This creates a Ponzi scheme dynamic where the debt grows exponentially. Godly Texas, where the bond debt per household is roughly $120,000, while the average home value is only $160,000, meaning the debt is nearly equal to the total asset value. Concealment and noble causes. The MEO bills, they were hidden from the public and international observers to maintain the illusion of an economic miracle. Germany was growing and Germany was prosperous while secretly preparing for war. The Texas school bonds, the point being that the noblest causes, we're doing this for the children, are used as propaganda to mask what I have shown as accounting fraud and bond fraud. The school superintendents and chief appraisers work together to set predetermined budgets and then manipulate the effective age and property cards to meet those numbers. The threat of total collapse. Just as the MEO bill fraud made in World War II an inevitable necessity to avoid Germany's bankruptcy, we have $5.1 trillion worth of bond debt, school district, nationwide. It's a ticking time bomb. If the controlled demolition of this system, which is repealing the property tax, doesn't happen, it will lead to a crisis in confidence and a financial crash worse than the 2008 housing bubble. The key stats are pretty important, and we've hit on these a couple of times. We estimate that we have $21.25 trillion worth of property overvaluation. This has occurred in the last 5 years alone, from which in 2024, $450 billion roughly in overtaxation. Money was stolen from the homeowners. In some Texas districts, taxpayers are on the hook for repayment that are many times the original amount borrowed. As a further example, and you're seeing this play out, and Travis showed you that the other day with the pictures of the tractors in London. As a further example, the European Union, United Kingdom, Ukraine, Germany, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Conroe, Texas, all did the exact same thing that the MEO bills did in Germany, which is to create money or debt, which is the cause of the problem, fraudulent bonds, that leads to both institutionalized systemic moral hazard and the symptoms of property tax lien foreclosures, bankruptcy, and or losing the roof over their head of roughly 37.8% of the households, which is roughly 42 million households. And in the case of the countries mentioned, they march toward war, all to cover up their fraud, just like Germany did in 1939. The school boards use inflated appraisals and equity strip property owners in terms of paying down their mortgage and place future debts upon the property owners from which there is no revenue to be obtained to continue the fraud, making property owners economic slaves to the debt created by criminals. And as we have filed with the DOJ, the FBI, and the SEC, this all ends in RICO, if not worse. No school district should ever be allowed access to the bond market and use property values from which to gain tax revenue. The school district's credit card must be canceled. Perpetual tax debt equals debt slavery. Institutionalized systemic moral hazard ends when the school districts no longer have access to the property valuation fraud by the central appraisal districts. Repeal all property tax in favor of the uniform states sales tax. On my website, there's a link. You'll just look it up. It's called benefits. Put the word in there, and it'll show you what the benefits are of repealing all property tax. They stole your money to transfer that wealth to those who did not earn it, and that is the definition of socialism. Socialism ends when you run out of other people's money, and that is now, because the median household income does not exist to pay for the fraudulent debt. Demand from your politicians the termination of the school district's credit card. We have learned, what we have shown you here today, that there is a direct correlation to the property tax fraud, silver scam, and printing of money via the US Treasury and the Federal Reserve. The nexus is the creation of false value, being fraudulent property valuation from which to steal tax revenue, fraudulent paper chasing paper from which there is no physical to back up that paper, and fraudulent printing of money, which causes inflation, which is a hidden tax. This is the reason why every person watching this video must be active to make the politicians aware and then push them into admitting the necessity of controlled demolition before the politicians push the world into meaningless and unnecessary wars. Your life and your children's lives depend on your involvement.
Now, if you've been following along with us, you know how important it is for Mitch and I to abolish property taxes, or repeal property taxes is a legal term, and wake up mom and pop to the atrocities and the debauchery that's been happening for the last several decades at least. Now, don't forget, you guys, we both have unique websites designed to help mom and pop. The first one being Mitch's website, which is right here, you guys. This is Mockingbird Property. So this has all of the evidence. This has all of the math. If you go to the DCAD right there, you can get the information, including the bill to repeal property taxes as well. And that bill has all of the math on how to abolish property taxes. We don't have to guess. The math